Here we are at the Visual Narrative Imperative.
Bonjour tout le monde.
And today's episode is...
Star Wars Direction Inspections.
Today's episode is brought to you by Grover.
I'm not the brains of the operation, but from what I understand, we're going to be talking about Star Wars, directors, and their inspirations. But I'm going to defer to the smart people, and then sit back and make jokes.
So first of all, what movies did we watch this week to prepare us for this?
All of the Star Wars.
Seven Samurai and Brick.
I watched Hidden Fortress, and which is a film by Akira Kurosawa, who George Lucas has been very, very open about, very strongly influencing, especially the first movie. That's a really interesting movie to watch. I think it holds up quite well. The acting is crap, but it's 1957. It's
With a lot of Kurosawa's films, yeah.
It's 1957, so it's really not terribly far removed from silent film era. And there's a lot of silent film about it. The way he blocks his characters, the way they move about the screen is very silent film. But the characters, the two main characters are R2-D2 and C-3PO. Just straight up. It starts with them going through a desert, getting in a fight, and going off in different directions and being captured. Then they are brought together, and they meet up with another character. Unfortunately, that character is not a Luke analog, but they do later meet up with someone who does have more than a bit of Obi-Wan Kenobi about him. There's a few shots that are almost direct lifts. Like where the framing exactly matches, the camera movement exactly matches. It's very obvious that it was a huge influence, and I think it does hold up quite well.
Which is pretty much with Kurosawa's films, like visually speaking, if you've seen like Seven Samurai as we were watching this week, and Seven Samurai is a beautiful looking film. It holds up in that respect. And the characters, their acting, no, it's dated.
Their voice acting, their body language and stuff is spot on. They're like a stage character.
Yeah.
Where they all overproject.
He knows how to use the lighting to the perfect effect and movement, like two things moving at one time, so it's visually interesting in that respect. And
there's always something moving in frame too.
Yeah, there's always something, whether it be the rain or the background of the shadows moving, which ties in perfectly with Star Wars, because Star Wars really is the dark and the light, and you see that immediately with the stormtroopers or the dark motif with Darth Vader.
I really thought you were going with some like weird Sith. Darth Motita.
Darth Motita.
Darth Mojito.
I love
Darth Jar Jar.
New drink idea. Darth Mojito.
Darth Mojito.
What would you put in it? Like black olive juice?
Jägermeister.
Yeah, that would work too.
For coloring, don't put a whole bunch in it, because then it tastes like asshole.
Yeah.
Like-
if you put too much in, it tastes like Jägermeister.
That grenadine red stuff, and basically the exterior's the black and red. Like I don't know. There's maybe a black and red Sith at some point, whatever those are.
Well, I mean, technically, Darth Vader's the Dark Lord of the Sith, and he's red and black when he
Well,
puts
what's
his
a
lightsaber
Sith?
on. He said Sith as recently as the first tie-in novel, which was Splinter of the Mind's Eye.
Okay, so is
That
it a
was,
book?
I believe,
I didn't read the book.
1977.
So Sith was never mentioned in the...
No, it was not.
Interesting.
I thought Palpatine said Sith at some point.
Well, okay, don't quote me on that. I don't pay as close attention as I
I'm
probably
on-
It could have
I'm
been,
not
it could have
sure.
been
But I didn't-
retconned with the Blu-rays.
But I did listen
That's true.
carefully.
There were a lot of retcons in the Blu-ray, especially with the whole like Palpatine being played by a different actor in Empire.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It was not originally.
Which I think fit in better.
Yeah. That one doesn't really bother me. The Anakin one bothered me a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
Not as much as it bothered some of the Superfan though. Yeah, looking at Lucas's influences, he's kind of like the embodiment of the commonly attributed to Picasso quote, the good artist copy, great artist steal, where direct lifts in many cases, in a lot of his films, just from other things, and they make the movie better. So who cares?
Yeah.
It's
That was
like
one of,
The people
they
he's stealing from.
Yeah.
well, except for like Kurosawa, he ended up like strong-arming the studio system into bringing him to America and creating like 2 or 3 of his most critically acclaimed films after that. Because his first movie, Tora Tora Tora, his first Hollywood movie, he was fired like 4 weeks after starting it, maybe even like 4 days, and then he got blacklisted. And Lucas, after the success of the first movie, basically used his influence to strong-arm them to bringing Kurosawa and giving him another chance and giving him free reign. And he produced 2 or 3 fantastic Hollywood movies, much more successfully than other foreign filmmakers that we imported, like John Woo, whose American films are just terrible.
Doves.
Yeah.
I love doves.
Or Jackie Chan. Jackie Chan's
he's
Hong Kong
fantastic.
movies are so much better, though.
It's fantastic. Yeah, they don't let you do a lot of the fun stuff here for some reason. I hit you! Next frame.
American movies cut too much.
It's because the actors can't hold a line of dialogue for very long. They say 3 words and it's new cut. Remind you of anyone's personal videos?
That's why Birdman was such a revelation. Is like you can actually see actors that can hold really freaking long takes.
Film nerds, we all fetishize long takes.
It's just
This is true.
There's a long take in the recent Spectre movie where they go from a crane cam to a steady cam back to a crane cam again, and then they do like a 180. It's pretty amazing, and there's tons of props and things moving and all this stunt work that's going on at the same time.
Nice.
Like, how did they pull that off?
That's impressive. I might have to go see it just for that.
Yeah, it's about 3 minutes, one take. Well, there's a cut in the middle, but it's just
It's
really
a
quick,
hidden
really
cut.
quick swipe.
Yeah. Just like the Daredevil hallway scene has, I think, 4 cuts in it,
Yeah.
and you don't necessarily notice.
Yeah.
Although I'm not so impressed by the cuts because it's like you're looking at a wall for a second.
Yeah.
You kind of guess that there was a cut there.
Yeah.
I'm more impressed by the fact that they changed the stuntman and the actor mid-scene with no cut. He stumbles into the hallway, and his stunt double comes out,
Interesting.
and then fights for a little bit, does a big flip, falls back into the doorway, and then the actor comes back out.
I didn't know that. That's
Yep.
really cool.
Fun fact.
Watch for the part where he does that one big flip over, and then 5 seconds later he just stumbles back into the doorway. It's great.
So going back to Kurosawa, because stay on target.
Stay
on
on
target.
And then we die.
But yeah,
came from
Kurosawa also
behind.
was a huge influence in terms of medieval type of imagery. George Lucas had a fetish, so-called, for fighting with swords and medieval art. So that's why kind of the fantasy element of Star Wars, it doesn't just look like a sci-fi. It looks like it's something old with something
More than
new.
that-
So uncivilized.
More than that, I'd go so far as to say Star Wars isn't sci-fi. It's
Yeah.
fantasy that's dressed up as sci-fi, very well dressed up. But it's the story of a farm boy that meets a wizard, and then goes off to kill the evil king.
You're a wizard, Harry. You must defeat
I think
Voldemort
one of the
or Darth
reasons
Vader.
why it's so popular is that Star Wars knew how to combine multiple styles and universal themes, dark versus light.
Yep,
and-
the Campbellian monomyth, as it's called. It's basically the idea that through the Arthurian legend and a bunch of Eastern legends and a bunch of African legends, you can see this one solid myth throughout time. And that is the hero has an ordinary life, he receives a call to action, refuses the call to action, there is divine intervention, he goes into the belly of the beast, and all these things that are directly Star Wars Episode 4. It is all 17 steps of the Campbellian myth, and Lucas has been very clear about doing that on purpose. He wanted to create the modern mythology, which is kind of like how Tolkien started looking at Lord of the Rings. He realized that Britain didn't have a national mythology, and he wanted to make one. But Lucas basically said, I want to do the same thing for America.
Yeah.
But ours has, Darth Vader, so it's much cooler.
God, would I pay to see Gandalf face Darth Vader?
Yeah, dude.
That'd be so
Yeah.
awesome.
I'm trying to make a point not to drop things like that because when we're talking about movies, we're talking about Star Wars, talking about all ages, and I don't want to. That's why I've been keeping it out of the Lego builds.
I might just, drop some beeps on the...
That works.
Because honestly, I've been-
R2D2 sounds, yeah.
Ah, yes. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts lately, and there's one where he only curses like once or twice an episode, but he bleeps it every time, and it makes it funnier every time. Okay, we've talked about Lucas. Do you see any obvious influences in Kirshner's work?
Kirshner.
Kirshner was kind of interesting. He was a long-term Hollywood guy who had been around but never quite had received stardom. And then he directed this smaller TV movie about hostages in Debe, and it was nominated for several Emmys, 9 I believe, and George Lucas wanted him. He just wanted him. He didn't want all these hotshot guys, and Kirshner was like, "Why do you want me? I don't even really necessarily want this." And he initially turned down the job, but thank goodness George Lucas convinced him. Because I don't think Empire Strikes Back should have been directed by George Lucas.
100% agreed.
George Lucas' masterpiece was the first Star Wars movie, and he put a lot of effort into that. And he had a good story, but he's not a good scriptwriter. He's just not.
Yep.
A lot of the first film was just carried by a lot of charisma, and
From a just like reading the screenplay, the first movie is not that strong. If you're just
Yeah.
like sitting there reading the screenplay, it's only when you actually see what happens on
it's just
screen.
they just
and
had
you see,
such good actors, and they
Yep.
just went over bad lines.
Yeah, it's like that's. I think I said this in the last episode. Harrison Ford can deliver a bad line and make you feel it. You know, he can deliver a shitty line and make it better.
George Lucas makes actors bad.
Well, he doesn't care for actors. Like
He
Ron
doesn't
Howard,
care about the
he
acting.
hates actors. Like when he was talking with Ron Howard, when Ron Howard was still an actor, he kind of liked Ron Howard because Ron Howard was going to go into the directing business, and Ron Howard was just struck back by how much George Lucas was talking to him. And it's like, if you make a film, just don't worry about the actors. Just worry about all of this. The actors are just set pieces for you to move around on your board. And it's just kind of sad because I think a lot of the reasons that the prequels didn't work quite as well was because of the script writing and not enough influence on the actors. Good thing with J.J. Abrams, which is a good tie-in here, is J.J. Abrams worked with actors really, really well. Actors that shouldn't necessarily be quite as good as they are. Like Quinto's a great actor, but he's not upper echelon actor. But him working with him with like Spock and Chris Pine. Chris Pine's a good actor, but he's not phenomenal. But all of a sudden, when J.J. Abrams works with them, they're noteworthy. You want to see
and
more
it's
of
like
them.
Cumberbatch is a fantastic actor, but I don't think he pulled off Scary in anything before that.
No,
And he pulled off Scary quite well.
I was terrified.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he was.
My table is broken.
What? He wasn't Khan.
Correct.
You know, I don't think he was a good Khan. If they would have given him a different name, it would have been a better movie.
Yeah. This is a problem with mythology. He was a great villain. He was not Roberto Montalban at all. They were like completely different. But I don't know. I love his villain-esque.
Stay on target.
Stay on
Stay on
target.
target.
Stay on target. But yeah, J.J. Abrams, his main influence was Lucas. And, well, obviously Spielberg
Lucas
as
and
well. All of his
Spielberg, yeah.
films feel really Spielberg.
Lucas and Spielberg are almost a pair when it comes to
Spielbergian.
influences.
Sounds like an alien. Ah, he's just a
That wouldn't-
Spielbergian.
That wouldn't surprise me if that happened in one of the movies, especially if, God forbid, Spielberg just like up and dies. I could totally see them making a Spielberg alien.
Spielbergian.
Because didn't they just they just made an action figure that was named after somebody that died? I don't remember who, but
Uncle Owen.
Han.
I don't think Han's gonna die.
Han dies
Personally.
first.
Han got shot first. That would be
That's so
terrible.
mean. It makes me happy.
Actually, it'll probably be Chewie.
Yeah. I mean, they've already killed him in the books. Fans are accepting of it already.
At least this time it'll mean
I just hope they
something.
don't go so over dramatic if they kill Chewie, because
Well,
like in the books
Abrams
they
handles
in
deaths
the
really
books
well,
they dropped a moon on him.
which was a little over the top.
Bit
but-
much.
yeah, it was way too much.
Yeah,
But Abrams handles deaths really well,
he
I
does.
think.
Yeah, he really does.
What could have been a horrible moment in Into Darkness and just like copying one of the most influential moments in Star Trek's history, where they switched place and had Pine go in, and Quinto had to sit there, Spock had to sit there and watch him die, and part of that was just fantastic music, Giacchino. But now we have John Williams, and John Williams is going to make every moment in this film that much more influential and that much more touching. It's going to be so exciting.
You know, that does kind of draw me to the...
Touching.
I know we're going completely out of order for what we were talking about. We've already done that. That does kind of bring me into the tie-in movies. What are they called? Star Wars Stories, I think they're calling it. No, they dropped the anthology name. I think they're just calling it Star Wars Stories now.
Oh, interesting. Well, because the first one's called Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Originally, I thought it was just Star Wars Rogue One.
As far as I'm aware, they're not going to be done by Williams.
Interesting. So
it's going to be really
like
interesting to see.
Or...
I don't know. I remember
there's plenty of good ones. I'd love to see.
It's
Max
going to be
Richter
really interesting to see how much that changes it. If they're going to try and go for a Williams feel, which I think would be a mistake. I mean,
some of the same motifs are definitely going to be in there, and they'll probably
there's going to be an
reference him
Imperial
like
March
on the credits that Williams. Yeah.
There's going to be an Imperial March if Vader shows up, and if Vader doesn't show up, that would be hugely disappointing.
I wouldn't be surprised if Nathan Johnson, the composer for Rian Johnson, who's going to be directing Episode 8 and writing for Episode 8 and 9. I wouldn't be surprised if he was a composer on one of those movies.
Yeah, the Gareth Johnson, by the way.
Gareth Edwards?
Yeah. God,
that guy.
I'm so
bad at names.
Rian Johnson and Gareth Edwards. Gareth Johnson and Ryan Edwards. I'd love them to see
Didn't I do the same thing with like Chris Miller and Phil Lord or something?
Yeah.
Where I got them backwards on the last episode. I'm so bad at name.
Your ears are so
Stay
far
on target.
back.
Stay on target.
Hey, I'm the joke guy. You guys need to stay on target.
What would you say for their influences?
Well, so are we talking about Chris Miller and Phil Lord?
That's good. That's the different one.
That's going to be really interesting because they're doing Han Solo movie, and their influences, they just wanted to do animation. That was all they wanted to do forever, and finally they got a chance to do it. Big film. They did some shorts before that, but Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. I love that movie, by the way. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. Everyone really liked it, and then they moved on to How to Train Your Dragon, another great movie, and Lego Movie. Oh my God, Lego Movies. I was gonna actually bring that today, but my brother took it somewhere.
They have shown that they can retell a pre-told story. With the 21-22 Jump Street.
Yeah. Well, yeah, completely changing it, but it was, yeah.
Yeah. Like, I don't want to see any retcons. At least not movie retcons in the Han Solo story. But at the same time...
And they get humor good.
Yes.
Which Han Solo is an inherently funny character. Sure, he's serious, which is also why we love him so much. But he pulls off these really sly...
He's really good at failing.
And Chewbacca's fits perfectly with him.
I'm really excited to see young Han Solo. I'm less excited to see young Chewbacca because they've already established that he doesn't look any different. You know?
There's a couple gray hairs on him.
There's a couple gray hairs. But I mean, episode...
What's a Wookiee's lifespan in canon? Isn't it a little bit longer?
Well, movie canon?
Yeah.
Existing canon?
Yeah.
There's not really an established...
That's true.
In the books, it's
but isn't
300 years.
The Clone Wars TV show's canon?
Yeah, it is. I'm not sure if they established it there, but I mean, the fact that Chewie's still alive from Episode 3 to Episode 7 establishes a 100 plus year canon.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that's 70 years between the 7 movies now?
Mm-hmm.
That's quite a time frame. Especially since he seemed to be mature and kind of in charge of stuff in Episode 3.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that movie doesn't exist. Actually, I have no problems with Episode 3.
No problems?
Well, I have about the same number of problems with 3 as I have with 6. I'm not the biggest Return of the Jedi fan.
I really like Return of the Jedi.
I really enjoy it, but there's a few things that screw it up for me.
Is the Ewoks one of them?
The Ewoks are one of them, and it's not so much The Ewoks themselves, I have no problems with the Ewoks as a thing, but I have a problem with the
Execution, it becomes a little hammy.
it's so hammy because they're too competent. If they faced more issues than they did, or if their failures were more thoroughly intercut with their tripping of walkers.
Well, they kind of had that happen when they were going to the place.
Yeah.
They had, like, some of them falling over each other and acting dorky.
But they fell over, and they were terrible. And then they were extraordinarily competent, and then they were falling over each other and terrible. It was 3 distinct things. If that would have been more intermingled, like they were falling over themselves and somehow being successful, I could have accepted that. But it was like they turned into just, like, Ewok commandos for 2 minutes, where they were just, like, destroying everyone.
I kind of accept it because they were able to capture Han and group and Leia. They captured them, and that kind of made them a little terrifying.
That was just because Chewie was hungry.
No, Chewie!
That is a bit of an issue. Honestly, it's really my only real issue with it. It's got the same scope creep that most sequels have, where it's part of what made episode 4 and 5 so charming is that it really only focused on what was happening to these characters, and by Return of the Jedi it was very much what is happening to everyone in the Rebel Alliance and the rest of the galaxy.
Which, I mean, you could tie into, like, it's growing in scope and seeing the influence.
It's growing in scope, but who was it? I think Lenin that said, 1 death is a tragedy, 1,000 deaths is a statistic. Nobody can really connect with a ship with 2,000 people on it blowing up. But you can totally connect with Obi-Wan dying.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, or, at the beginning of the movie, Yoda dying.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like those all had impact, but when you start seeing starships being blown up by the Death Star, it feels
I'm not
just
sure it was
like when
supposed to have an
Alderaan
impact.
blew
I think
up.
the main impact there was
No,
Luke, and Luke seeing that, like,
Yeah, the
he
way
was
that
going
they
to lose
cut
everything.
to Luke right after that showed me that they wanted it to have impact, but it fell so flat.
I don't know about that. I think one of the most visceral moments in all of Star Wars is when he goes and confronts Emperor Palpatine, or the Emperor at that point, and the conflict in his face. And it's like one of the best shots of all time, and not just Star Wars, but in movies, is the black and dark line down his face as he's trying to figure out what to do, and seeing that. Yeah, we could lose everything.
My
right
favorite
here.
shot from that movie is actually the sabers across Palpatine's face.
That's a great shot too.
And then to cut right there is fantastic editing. That cut needed to be there.
Yeah, sure, it's a little maybe too much humor, but we kind of
I
grown
don't
to
di-
appreciate Star Wars as a humorous thing at that point.
I don't disagree with the humor. I just felt like it was out of tone with the rest of the movie.
I could see that.
That humor maybe
It's a little
earlier in the
disjunctive.
movie would have been fine, but at this point we're talking about they're laughing and chuckling while they're trying to save the universe from another Death Star.
Yeah.
While they are nominally trying to keep all of their friends from dying by crashing into a wall. It's one of those where it's just like it felt slightly out of character for the characters. For just they're just chill and it's story time with 3PO. That felt like one of the first examples of Star Wars fan
I feel like
service.
they deserved it at that point, though. We
They
had been put through the ringer with Empire Strikes Back, and so dark. And even, like, the beginning of the film was so dark with the Jabba, and then we slowly started to get in the light tone. And yeah, sure, they started
Actually, do you want to talk about Star Wars fan service? The bikini was Star Wars fan service.
I was serious.
That was the best fan service ever.
And the Gamorreans. Oh, no.
What about that singing thing that was in there?
That was Jar Jar Binks fan service. Actually, he really did bother me a little more than the Ewoks did.
Star Wars took a weird turn in Chapter 6, in my opinion.
What about it?
Well, everything was kind of like up to it was, desert planets and space travel and cloud cities and everything. And they just kind of drop them into a jungle, and it was just kind of such a
Welcome to the jungle.
change of scenery, and the Ewoks, and just it felt like an entirely different story to me at that point.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't put it into those.
It was kind of like two different movies.
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like, speaking of fan service, I feel like they could have gone back to Tatooine or something at that point of the trilogy, and it would have been justified. Like, there wasn't much done, right, in the prequels, but the fact that they did go back to Tatooine in the second one was able to give you some character growth on Anakin Skywalker. It's the only character growth he got. Man, have you read the
I don't
prequel?
like sand.
That is worth skipping that movie just for that. George Lucas is
I
so
want
bad
to see
at
Topher
dialogue.
Grace's cut so badly,
Yeah,
though.
I do. Have you read the novelizations of the prequel movies?
I read the second one on it was like a screenplay format.
Okay, so the first one was written by Terry Brooks, I believe, Sword of Shannara. The second one was written by R.A. Salvatore, the guy who killed Chewbacca. And the third one was written by Matthew Woodring Stover, who is one of my favorite authors of all time, and that novelization is so much better than the movie in every way. The novelizations give you the character growth Anakin should always have had. And there's things that got cut from the movies that ended up making it into the books that, if those scenes would have been filmed, would have made the entire story better.
So after watching episode 9, what did you think? Since we've already pirated them already. Colin Trevorrow was actually a serviceable director.
Colin Trevorrow, is it Trevorrow or
He
Trevorrow?
keeps saying
Either
Trevor.
way
It's Trevorrow.
works.
Colin
Trevorrow.
T.
Colin T.
Colin T.
If he's going to be our 9th director, he's kind of has an
I
interesting
really
influences.
enjoyed Jurassic World. It was a junk movie, but I really enjoyed it.
I don't think he should have had his hands in the script or the screenplay in any of it, but he does get how to pay homage visually and
How to-
tonally to
Yep, how
previous
to get
films.
somebody else's visual style.
Yeah, he nails it.
He had his own definitive style, but he was also able to give you Spielberg shots, which a Spielberg shot and a Lucas shot aren't all that different.
True.
Fundamentally, they're very similar. It's like when you watch Indiana Jones, is that a Spielberg shot or a Lucas shot? It's kind of both.
Yeah,
You
because
know?
Lucasfilm was, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of both.
Spielberg's probably a little bit more dynamic.
Dynamic.
Dynamic. Lucas was a little bit more simplistic. He liked to, which was kind of how Kurosawa was. He just liked to use one thing, one shot, pan, and have a couple things moving in different directions. But he did it simplistically so that it was beautiful.
And Spielberg is much more subtle. Spielberg is a more realistic filmmaker. The movements that the people make on screen feel like something you would expect those people to make in the real world. Lucas and Kurosawa are both very exaggerated in their movements.
Yeah.
Like when Luke Skywalker walks into the prison cell for the first time, he does that big step in, pulls the helmet off. That is not a realistic human movement. That's not how someone actually would have done it, especially not someone as awkward as Luke.
You came in that thing? You're braver than I thought.
Yeah, but the movement is very exaggerated.
It's very beautiful looking, though.
It is.
The way he's like, whoa.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's movie blocking rather than like people in a room blocking. I think that's really the biggest difference between the visuals of Spielberg and the visuals of Lucas.
Which, going back to Trevorrow, he's really gets just simplicity. Like, if you've seen Safety Not Guaranteed with Mark Duplass and the Johnson kid, the guy. I can't remember his name, but really good actor. I can't believe I'm forgetting it. But Safety Not Guaranteed, very simplistic movements in that movie. And just a really simple film, but really brilliant. And then going from indie film to something big, blockbuster, and then Star Wars, which is pretty much how all of the directors that are like in the anthology films or even the other films have been. J.J. Abrams has been doing big blockbusters for a while.
I quite enjoyed Jurassic World, but I'm not sure he's the right choice for the finale of a trilogy.
Yeah,
That's the only thing that gives me pause.
That's true, but then again, he's not the one writing the screenplay. It's going to be Ryan
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
And Ryan Johnson He's like Nolan-esque in that he's incredible writing something that's dark and has some tone that's just gets you out of your seat feeling just ugly inside. But he's also... I don't know where I'm going with this. Stay on target. Stay on target.
While you were saying that, I was not paying attention at all. But I was thinking about,
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that is awesome.
Trevorrow. Actually, I think he could pull off a finale because
If you know what I mean.
that dark third act of Jurassic World was one of my favorite third acts of the year. It built very well. It referenced prior works. And, you've got the T-Rex coming back. You've got the Mosasaurus just going... Spoiler alert.
He has a lot of fan service in there, which is awesome, but almost a little bit scares me.
Yeah, it does kind of scare me. But some of that fan service was subtle. You wouldn't necessarily know that was the same T-Rex. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't realize that T-Rex reacted to the flare the same way because it's the same one. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't necessarily expect that was the T-Rex from the first movie unless you were a big fan. That's the kind of fan service that I don't mind. The kind of stuff that doesn't require... Yeah, right? The kind of fan service that doesn't necessarily go, he's in.
Oh my gosh!
The kind of fan service that just kind of exists quietly off in a corner.
Yeah.
That's the kind of fan service I want to see. I don't want Han to say to Leia, I know. I don't want to see that. But I do want to see you have to have fan service. Otherwise it just seems like they're not connected to the original movie.
Which is like with Garrett Edwards. He's really good at pulling off other people's styles. Like Spielberg and Ridley Scott.
Eyebrow waggle.
With Godzilla. He was just...
Steven Spielberg, Ridley Scott,
Godzilla.
Godzilla.
God. He pulls off God's camera angles really well. Mm-hmm. It's impressive.
Yeah, that really
just
overhead shot.
It just shows everything.
Yeah. It's this really high overhead shot, kind of just yeah.
It's pretty amazing. Have you seen God Johnson?
Okay, so
he's a great director.
God Johnson.
That's the Johnson guy.
Okay, so let's see. Are there any anthology directors we haven't hit on yet?
Well, I mean, we have talked about Gareth Edwards a little bit, and Chris Lord and Phil Miller. Interesting, Boba Fett, we don't know who's going to be directing that.
Who would you like to see?
Denis Villeneuve. I know, it's a hard-pronounced name. He recently did Enemy, which I think is an absolute masterpiece. One of the best films. One of the top 10 films of the last 5-10 years. Really complicated, but he understands tone. It's so dark. Recently did Sicario, and he's done Prisoners with Jake Gyllenhaal and Hugh Jackman. And I feel like you could do something like that with the Boba Fett film.
He's
something
not a director, but I really want it written by Vince Gilligan.
Ridley Scott.
Yeah, Ridley Scott would be...
Ridley Scott gets tone really good. He's not good at screen. He doesn't do any screenwriting.
He is fantastic when he's writing something that's in somebody else's world.
Well, he doesn't write anything. The only thing that, even Blade Runner, it wasn't even his idea to throw in that plot twist at the end that he's actually not human, that he's a replicant. That was actually the screenwriters.
Spoilers!
It's like a 30-year-old movie, bro.
I don't care. I've never seen it. Wish I was joking. That's with the Ford, right?
Yes, the Ford.
The Ford.
Model T.
It was
The Model T was
the Model
not a human
T in
all
there was
along.
awesome.
Damn.
But yeah, the Ford was
I was
in there.
eventually going to watch it.
It's not really a film.
We could have been talking about it in some other themed podcast where I would have to watch it as homework and be like the guy that sees it all for the first time.
I was
wanna rip
excited.
off
I was
Steven
excited.
that much.
I was excited watching Blade Runner, but I don't really like Blade Runner. Sorry to say, it's super slow moving and not much happens.
It's really
except
slow moving, but it's gorgeous.
It's gorgeous looking. It should have been like a 40-minute short film though.
necessarily.
I kind of have the same argument about Interstellar. I felt like that movie was far too long for its own good.
Yeah, that's true.
But The Martian,
That's why I thought of it.
Gladiator.
yeah,
He
Alien.
gets,
which is also still too long.
Alien.
Yeah.
which
I
was
think
also way too long as well.
I think he could handle he could handle Boba Fett very well. A dark character. I'd love to see like a Vince Gilligan who's shown that he's really good at writing crime.
Oh, that's so distracting. I'm sorry for my.
I'd love to
addiction.
see a Wes Anderson thrown in there.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine a Wes Anderson Star Wars movie, but that would just be.
Wes Craven.
Oh,
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Wes Craven, horror guy. He does
Oh.
horror movies.
Okay.
Doesn't he do like Nightmare on Elm
I
Street?
think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Freddy
Star
Krueger.
Wars horror movie.
Be bounty hunter.
There's a Star Wars
slash-
horror book.
slasher.
Where the stormtroopers turn into zombies. It's actually pretty good.
Might as well just do like an adult film director, Star Wars.
Ron Jeremy. Watch it,
Doing the Boba Fett movie.
and watch it turn out to be like this Oscar-winning thing. For some reason, they do a sci-fi movie in the Oscars because it's that good.
Yeah, right. When was the last sci-fi movie to win like a Best Picture?
I don't think it ever has. I think they don't consider them.
Sci-fi film has never won, but
A fantasy film is one.
Fantasy, yes.
fantasy's won.
not
Sci-fi's never won.
And Star Wars is too sci-fi to be considered, even though it's fantasy.
Yeah.
Well, Star Wars was nominated.
Was Star Wars or was Empire? I feel like it was Empire.
Might have been both.
Yeah. Andrew has a phone. He can do
I
it.
don't think Return of the Jedi was nominated,
Good.
but I think it did. It did win special effects, which it should have. It was
Mhm.
astounding for its time. I think all three won, if I can remember correctly.
They better have.
Yeah.
They were just so far ahead of everything else of their time.
Yeah. Well, which is cool with like J.J. Abrams. J.J. Abrams is incredible at special effects and combining it with something practical effects.
Yeah.
If you watch Star Trek Into Darkness, it's flawless. Flawless. You can't
both
tell
of
what's
the Star
CGI
Treks.
and what's not.
Yep. Both of the Star Treks are like that.
Yeah.
And the amount of practical effect I've seen from behind the scenes stuff fills me with glee. There is so much gorgeousness happening on set.
Yeah. I mean, too much practical effects can be bad, and same with CGI. But I feel like they're striking a really good balance, and from what we see in the trailers,
Yep.
it's so beautiful looking.
Well,
Hopefully, it's
things
good
like the
as
TIE
trailers.
Fighter in the trailer that is tumbling down into the atmosphere and its solar panel is like collapsing in as it hits the air. That's the kind of thing that you can only do with CG, but it looks like something that was done with a model.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's striking a really good balance of, you know, like it's yeah.
What was basically what George Lucas did.
Well, actually, no, they were stationary. The camera only moved, but the camera
Oh,
moved.
okay.
Yeah. It's
And
kind
he
of
did his own voice effects. You see George Lucas in the background.
So A New Hope won 6 competitive Academy Awards. At the 50th Academy Awards, Best Art Direction, Best Costume Design, Best Film Editing, Best Original Score, Best Sound, and Best Visual Effects.
Was it nominated for anything else?
I don't know.
I think it was nominated for Best Picture.
It was in the Golden Globes.
Oh, okay. That would make sense. Golden Globes is much more adventurous with what they nominate.
Oh, I love that too.
Yeah.
It's like
Oscar-
Truman Show. It won the not two major categories, but it won Best Actor with Jim Carrey. His best performance, I think he should have won.
Yes.
And it won Best Score. And Philip Glass's, and I can't pronounce the other guy's name, their score was one of the best scores ever.
There's a rumor that there is a Yoda in episode 7.
There could be.
There's just Hayden Christensen off in the corner meditating. And Luke just doesn't. There's no interaction between the two. He goes, "Bye, Dad." God, oh,
I'd almost want to see that. I know it would get people angry, but like maybe just like in 2 seconds he turns his head and like Luke just kind of gestures to him. That might work. I don't know.
yeah. There's a lot of ways they could do that. I would be interested in seeing a Yoda. I would not mind that.
What about a Qui-Gon?
You know, Qui-Gon wasn't too bad. But the fewer references to the prequels, the better.
That's true.
Yeah.
But we're gonna have a big one. I mean,
JJ's been very clear about there not being any midichlorians in his universe.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's all but said he has removed them from canon. My personal favorite fan theory is that since the only person that ever mentioned midichlorians is Qui-Gon,
he just made it up because it's like
he just made it up. He was just shitting him. It's like he really just.
He's like, just shut up, Anakin. Let me just throw this theory.
He just basically is like, the Force is strong with this one. Better bullshit his mom.
Oh, but he does talk about it with Obi-Wan.
He does talk about it with Obi-Wan.
When he's talking like, is midichlorian got as high as Yoda? And then Obi-Wan's like, yeah, it is. Inside joke.
Yeah, right. I can't think of anybody else that I'd really want to see doing the Boba Fett movie, even if it even is a Boba Fett movie. Because originally, when that rumor first came about, that was going to be the Gareth Edwards written by Gary Whitta movie, which ended up being Rogue One. Which, there could still be a Boba Fett in it. It'd be about the right time period to just bring back the guy that played Django. I think we're going to have to revisit this once Episode 7 comes out.
Definitely.
And really share our thoughts. So thanks for joining us on this second episode of Visual Narrative Imperative.
I'm Brandon Ray.
I'm John Zander.
Until next time.
Don't forget to rate, comment, subscribe, and share us with your friends. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Fan spending. This whole outro is a disaster. We're going to have to start over.